They vanished without a trace from their beach house in 1991. No note, no witnesses, no explanation. For 27 years, their fate remained buried in silence. But what was uncovered decades later would unravel everything we thought we knew. Stay with us until the very end. The final twist will leave you speechless. If you're into true crime-style mysteries packed with suspense, secrets, and shocking revelations, hit that subscribe button now. You won't want to miss what comes next. August 3rd, 1991. A Saturday that began like any other summer day along the windswept shores of Penumbra Coast. The morning sun had broken through a thin veil of mist at precisely 6:27 a.m., casting golden slivers over the Atlantic as gulls screamed overhead. The surf whispered steadily, brushing against the weathered steps of the last beach house on the southern strip. House number 47. Nestled at the edge of the dunes, half shielded by tall sea grass and jagged pine trees, the gray-painted house looked like a remnant of a forgotten world, its wood faded by salt and wind, its porch creaking in the silence. It belonged to Andrew and Lila Varnum. He was a former journalist, sharp-eyed and obsessed with stories that never made the papers. She was a painter who traded gallery halls for isolation, preferring the rhythmic pulse of the ocean to the applause of art critics. They were in their early 30s, had no children, and spent their weekends in solitude away from city noise. To the townspeople of Windermere, they were the quiet couple with money and secrets. But no one really knew them, just enough to smile at the gas station or wave from the post office. At exactly 9:42 a.m. that morning, a neighbor, Mrs. Ellerby, who lived 2 houses down, saw Andrew and Lila walking barefoot along the shoreline. Andrew was holding a camera. Lila was laughing. That laugh, she would later swear, echoed across the beach, light, carefree, untouched by anything ominous. It would be the last sound anyone ever heard from them. By 7:15 p.m., a storm rolled in without warning. The clouds bloomed thick and black. Rain fell in short, violent bursts, the kind of weather the locals called sea curses. By 8:30 p.m., all beachgoers had retreated inland, except, apparently, the Varnums. Their porch light was still on, flickering like a signal in the distance. Then, just past 10 p.m., the light died. The next morning, the house stood eerily quiet. The screen door hung ajar. A beach towel was draped across the railing, soaked through. The Jeep in the driveway was untouched, keys still in the ignition. The radio inside played static. Andrew's leather notebook was splayed open on the table, a pen resting across its spine. A glass of orange juice, untouched, sat on the counter. Lila's shoes were by the door. Her sketchbook was on the couch, open to a half-finished charcoal drawing of the ocean. They were gone. Not missing. Gone. No signs of struggle. No broken glass. No footprints in the sand. No screams. No blood. Just silence and absence. The first to notice was the local cleaner, Marcy, who arrived at 9 a.m. Sunday to tidy the house before the couple's Monday departure. She knocked, waited, peeked through the windows. Everything looked disturbingly undisturbed. She called the sheriff. Sheriff Raymond Keene was a tall, grizzled man with heavy bags under his eyes, a lifelong resident of Windermere. He took one look around the place and knew something was wrong. Not wrong like kids gone camping without telling anyone. Wrong like pages missing from a book that had never been read. That afternoon, the Varnums' parents were contacted. Within 24 hours, both sets, Walter and Irene Varnum and Gloria and Henry Mallard, flew in from different corners of the country. Confusion greeted them first, then denial, then the creeping horror that something inexplicable had swallowed their children whole. Walter Varnum, a retired military man, couldn't stop pacing the beach. He wore out the soles of his boots walking up and down that stretch of sand, searching for something, anything. Irene sat on the porch, chain-smoking with trembling fingers. Her voice lost pitch after the third day. Gloria sobbed into silence, while Henry contacted private investigators before the police had even finished dusting for fingerprints. But there were none. Not a single print that didn't belong to the Varnums. No DNA, no fibers. Nothing foreign. Only one thing raised a question. In the upstairs bedroom, Lila's wedding ring had been left on the windowsill. Andrew's watch sat beside it, ticking. Both had been removed intentionally. Carefully, the media came in waves, sniffing for a story. Headlines read, "Couple disappears without a trace from remote beach house. Vanished at sea," or something else. "Lovers lost forever." For weeks, the town buzzed with theories. Some believed they drowned, swept away by the tide during the sudden storm. Others whispered darker thoughts: suicide pact, witness protection, alien abduction. One fisherman swore he saw shadowy figures dragging something through the dunes that night, but he was drunk and no one listened. The parents didn't sleep. Walter began sleeping in the house, convinced his son might come back. He listened to the radio static every night, thinking maybe it was a message. Irene painted over Lila's sketches, turning them into warped shapes of grief. Gloria clutched a scarf Lila had left behind as if it were a lifeline. Henry kept pressing authorities, hired another 3 private investigators, even bribed a local sheriff in the next county to reopen the search with divers. Nothing turned up. No bodies. No signs of travel. No bank activity. Not even a whisper. By the 5th year, they began to unravel. Walter drank. Irene checked into a facility after a breakdown in a grocery store aisle. Gloria stopped leaving her bedroom. Henry started living in hotels, chasing shadows and tips that led nowhere. The Varnum's house was eventually auctioned. No one wanted it. The locals said it was cursed. Lights flickered there at night. Doors opened when no one touched them. Sometimes, late in the evening, Lila's laugh still echoed faintly across the beach, according to Mrs. Ellerby. She never went near the place again. The police moved on. Files were boxed, shelved, buried under newer tragedies. The town forgot. The coast weathered the years. New sand dunes shifted. Storms came and went. Tourists returned. And then, on September 18th, 1997, 6 years after Andrew and Lila disappeared, something surfaced. It began with a storm. A brutal one. Hurricane Evelyn tore through the coastline, ripping away years of sediment and dune grass. In its wake, it exposed an old, rusted septic tank buried deep behind house number 47 near the tree line. Construction crews, hired to assess storm damage, nearly overlooked it, until one worker noticed an unnatural hollow echo when tapping the top. Inside were no bones, no remains, but there was a box, a sealed metal container, wrapped in aged plastic. Inside, preserved better than expected, was a camera. Andrew's camera, the same one seen by Mrs. Ellerby that morning in 1991. Along with it, an envelope, yellowed, water-damaged, but intact. It contained 12 Polaroid photographs. Blurry, muddied, but unmistakably real. Images of Andrew and Lila. Bound, eyes wide, terror frozen in their faces. Shadows behind them, figures in raincoats, masks. One photo had a timestamp, August 3rd, 1991, 10:14 p.m. Another showed the beach house interior, a mirror reflection of one figure holding the camera. And finally, a shot taken from what looked like underground. Lila curled in a corner, mouth gagged with duct tape. The last photo was blank, only static. The parents were called. Again, Sheriff Keene, now a tired man with too many ghosts behind him, reopened the case. The town stirred. Rumors ignited. Someone had taken them, held them. But why? And where? And why, after all these years, leave a trail? Something didn't make sense. Someone was playing a game, and it wasn't over. The town of Windermere hadn't seen this kind of stir in decades. Word spread fast. By noon the day after the discovery, the rusted septic tank had become a shrine of unease. Police had cordoned off the area, but it didn't stop the locals from gathering behind yellow tape, whispering. Nobody said it out loud, but everyone knew the storm hadn't just torn up soil. It had unearthed a secret someone had gone to great lengths to bury. Sheriff Keene stared at the photographs laid out across his desk, his hands shaking slightly. He'd seen his fair share of horror across a 30-year career, but this was different. These weren't crime scene photos. These were memories trapped in time, moments of helpless terror captured by a monster who had never been caught. The timestamp, 10:14 p.m., still looped his head like a countdown. It was the same time the power had gone out in house number 47. It was the last moment before Andrew and Lila had vanished. He stared long at the final photo, the black static, the absence of light. It wasn't just a malfunction. It felt like a message. He ordered the camera processed, the film analyzed. The box was dusted. The area where the tank had been unearthed was scanned for more evidence. But 6 years is a long time. Time erodes everything. Memories, clues, even justice. The Varnums' parents were flown back in understate escort. Walter didn't say a word at the airport. His eyes were glass. Irene, gaunt and thinner than before, simply clutched a rosary in her palm and whispered prayers that had long lost their power. Gloria collapsed when she saw the photos. Henry had to carry her from the station. None of them could look away from the face of Lila, her expression frozen in that final image. It wasn't just fear. It was betrayal, as if she recognized whoever was behind the lens. Within the week, a task force was assembled. Old files were reopened. Interviews reconducted. Witnesses re-questioned. Sheriff Keene personally led a re-sweep of the old house, now boarded and partially collapsed from hurricane damage. Something had changed inside it. The air. It wasn't abandonment. It was suffocation. Like the walls had absorbed the screams and were just waiting for someone to listen. In the attic, under a loose floorboard, they found something new. Another box. Smaller. Wooden. Sealed tight with a rusted latch. Inside were 2 items. A pocket watch, engraved with Andrew's initials. AV. Its face cracked, hands frozen at 10:14. And a strip of film negatives. Unprocessed. Sheriff Keene stared at them under the inspection light. The images were grainy, but some shapes could be made out. Walls, a small light bulb, what looked like a door with heavy bolts on the outside. Basement? But house number 47 didn't have a basement. Or so they thought. Architectural plans from 1962 were pulled from county archives. Keene, hunched under a lamp in the back of the municipal building, traced his finger along the hand-drawn blueprint. There was, beneath the foundation, a space-marked storm cellar. Not accessible from inside the house. Covered decades ago, supposedly sealed, except someone had reopened it. With ground-penetrating radar, the space was rediscovered, an 8x12 concrete room, buried 6 feet below the crawl space. The entrance had been under a layer of earth, behind the trees, near where the septic tank had been found. No one had ever checked that far out. Excavation began. Shovels. Machines. Sweat. It took 2 full days to reach the hatch. The smell hit first. Mold. Rot. Time. The hatch groaned as it opened. Darkness, stare back. When the light was lowered, silence followed. No bodies. No blood. But the walls were covered in words, scratched in over and over again, with what appeared to be nails. Fingernails. Why? Asterisk, asterisk. Stop. He's watching. Still here. We begged. Not dead. Beneath those words were drawings. Charcoal and ash used like primitive tools. Stick figures. Chains. Eyes. So many eyes. In the corner of the room sat a rusted chair, bolted to the floor. A single chain still attached to the leg. Dried strands of hair were recovered from it. Lila's, confirmed by DNA. Something terrible had happened in that room. But the worst part, the room showed signs of recent use. Scratches on the inside of the hatch were fresh. The padlock had been changed, modern, unweathered. A plastic water bottle, expiration date 1996, lay in the corner. Someone had kept returning to that room, even after Andrew and Lila had disappeared. That's when Keene made the call he'd been dreading. They needed the FBI. Agents arrived in black SUVs 2 days later. They took over the investigation. Drones scanned the entire area. A mile radius was swept. Dogs were brought in. More was uncovered. Discarded ropes, scraps of fabric, a raincoat buried in sand. But no sign of Andrew. No sign of Lila. And then, just as suddenly as the case had reignited, something darker began to take root. The Varnums' parents began receiving mail. Unmarked envelopes. No return address. Inside, Polaroids. New ones. Pictures of house number 47. Recent ones. The porch. The hatch. One photo showed the parents themselves, standing behind the police line, completely unaware they were being watched. In one, a new message was scrawled on the back in red ink. "You shouldn't have come back." FBI took the letters, analyzed fingerprints, found none. They checked local surveillance cameras, traffic cams. Nothing. Whoever was doing this knew the town, knew the house, knew them. Sheriff Keene began sleeping in his office. The pressure was suffocating. He couldn't eat, couldn't think. He was haunted by the photo of Andrew's face, lips sealed with duct tape, eyes screaming. It was during a sleepless night, pacing the station hallway, that Keene remembered something from the original file. A man, a drifter. His name had come up in 1991, briefly, Caleb Strickland. Mid-40s, had been living out of his van parked near the dunes the week Andrew and Lila disappeared. He was questioned once, said he hadn't seen anything, and was let go. No record, no warrant. Vanished the next day. But Keene had never forgotten his face. He pulled the original composite sketch, showed it to one of the agents. They ran it through updated databases and hit a match. Different name now, living under the alias Mark Herner. Current address, Gulfport, Mississippi. Worked at a dockyard. Lived in a trailer by the marsh. Off-grid. They flew out the next morning. But when they arrived, the trailer was empty. Inside, they found more photographs. Not just of the Varnums. Of other couples. Other towns. Different years. All gone. All unsolved. But one photo stood out. Lila. Older. Weaker. Sitting in a dark room. Eyes hollow. And dated just 2 years prior. 1995. For years after she vanished. Asterisk, asterisk. She had still been alive. Which meant she could still be alive now. The photograph of Lila. Older, gaunt, dressed in the same threadbare clothes from 1991, but visibly aged, spread across the FBI's operations board like wildfire. Her hair was matted, her expression vacant, as though she'd stopped screaming years ago. But her eyes were unmistakable. Even after 4 years, even under dim lighting and deteriorated resolution, it was her. A timestamp confirmed it. October 14th, 1995. She had been alive 4 years after the disappearance. Walter Varnum collapsed into a chair when he saw the image. For him, it was proof of life and death. If she was still alive in 95, where was she now? Did she escape? Was she still imprisoned? Or worse? The trailer in Gulfport was torn apart by agents. Hidden compartments were found beneath the floorboards, filled with maps, receipts, and dozens more photos, some dating back to the 1970s. Nearly all the photos followed a chilling pattern. Couples. Always 2 people. Almost always taken days before they went missing. Locations spanned the country. Coastal towns, lake cabins, secluded rentals. Whoever had been behind this had stalked them first. Lurked. Waited. Then taken. Strickland, if that was his real name, had vanished again. A man who never existed in any official records. No birth certificate. No employment history prior to 1982. The few fingerprints lifted inside the trailer were smudged, intentionally distorted. His trail ran cold, like smoke and wind. But one map mattered more than the others. Marked in red was a small town just 60 miles north of Windermere. A place called Linden Hollow. Barely known, barely populated, but circled 3 times, and beneath it, scrawled in fading ink, Night Garden. Nobody knew what it meant. Sheriff Keene and 2 FBI agents drove out to Linden Hollow that night. The town was barely more than a stretch of road lined with boarded storefronts and sagging porches. Only 30 residents remained, mostly elderly. It was a place forgotten by time and purpose. A ghost waiting for the wind to carry it off the map. But on the outskirts, past a thicket of pine forest, they found it. An old gate, rusted shut, covered in vines and dead ivy. A plaque sat half buried beneath dirt and moss. It read, Night Garden, Private Estate. No trespassing. It was a crumbling ruin. A brick manor once grand, now split open like a corpse. The roof had collapsed in multiple places. Windows shattered. Ivy strangled the walls like veins. But despite its decay, someone had been inside recently. Keene could tell from the muddy boot prints in the foyer. Room after room told stories without speaking. Decades of dust had settled over untouched furniture. Rotting curtains swayed without wind. But in the back of the house was a locked metal door. Not original. Installed later. Heavy. Industrial. It took 2 men and a crowbar to pry it open. Beyond it was a narrow corridor. Lights strung above the ceiling flickered to life. Motion sensor. Modern wiring. At the end of the corridor, another door. Behind that, hell, it wasn't a room. It was a chamber, lined with steel walls. No windows. Cold. In the center was a raised platform with 2 chairs, rusted, bolted down. Chains beside them. A mounted camera pointed directly at them. And shelves, lined with labeled VHS tapes. One for every couple. Windermere, Lake Oswego, Port Charlotte, Cedar Pines, and more. Andrew and Lila had a tape. Keen didn't want to play it, but he had to. They inserted the tape into a recovered player, the image crackling to life. First static, then the interior of the chamber. Lila and Andrew, strapped to the chairs, breathing hard, sweat and fear on their faces. Andrew mouthed something, no audio. A figure appeared, wearing a rubber mask, unrecognizable, faceless. It approached Lila first, touched her face, then moved behind her. She screamed, or tried to. Her mouth was gagged. The tape ended before anything further happened. It was like a sick trailer of what came next. The other tapes were similar, some more violent, some calm. All ended abruptly. None showed deaths. None showed releases, because no one was ever released. Until one tape changed everything. It was unmarked, the image shaky, handheld, a forest, nighttime, heavy breathing. And then, the camera pan left. A woman, stumbling, dirty, bloody. It was Lila. The date stamp was November 2nd, 1997, asterisk asterisk, just days before the septic tank discovery, asterisk asterisk. She had escaped, but the tape never showed who was filming, or what happened after. Was it a snuff trophy, or a cry for help? The FBI launched a full excavation of the estate. They uncovered secret rooms, tunnels beneath the garden, and evidence that people had been kept in cages. Everything was clean, sterilized. No DNA, no fingerprints. The tapes were the only artifacts that remained, and the victims, like Andrew and Lila, remained missing. A massive search ensued in the woods behind the property. Cadaver dogs hit on several locations. Bones were found, but all animal. Pigs, deer, nothing human. Sheriff Keene couldn't sleep. He returned to the night garden alone one night, flashlight in hand. Something about the place kept calling him, begging him to return. He stood in the chamber for hours, staring at the empty chairs. Then he heard it, scraping, behind the wall. He followed the sound, knocking on walls until a hollow echo responded. He pried open a panel and found a narrow tunnel, just wide enough to crawl through. It led to a second chamber, empty, except for a wall covered in photos of every couple, every location, and at the center, Andrew and Lila. Beneath their photo, a handwritten note. She's not done yet. Not he. She. The FBI had always assumed it was a male suspect. The drifter. The man in the mask. But something shifted in that moment. A theory emerged. What if the man wasn't the mastermind, but the puppet? What if someone else had been running this all along? And what if Lila hadn't escaped? What if she had adapted? Keene couldn't explain why the thought chilled him so deeply. But it did. Because in the final frames of the escape video, something strange had caught his eye. Lila had been smiling, not in relief, but in satisfaction. The wind howled through the decaying corridors of the night garden estate, as if the walls were still breathing, moaning, whispering, remembering. Sheriff Keene stood in the second chamber with the flashlight trembling in his hand, the cone of light shaking across that wall of faces. Dozens of them, all victims, all vanished, all staring out through yellowing photographs like souls trapped behind thin plastic. But it was the center photo that made the bile rise in his throat. Lila Varnum, wild hair, cracked lips, dirt streaking her cheek, and smiling. It wasn't a scream frozen in place. It was peace. No, not peace. Pride. For weeks, Keene couldn't stop seeing that smile. In his office, in his sleep, every time he closed his eyes. He tried to rationalize it. Shock, relief, insanity. But the voice in the back of his mind kept saying it louder and louder. She wasn't just a victim anymore. The FBI analysis only added fuel to the fire. They enhanced the final frames of the escape video, adjusted contrast, ran motion tracking. It showed Lila stumbling through the woods, barefoot, bloodied, and then stopping. Just for a second, she turned, looked directly into the lens, and smiled. Behind her, blurred by motion, was a figure lying in the dirt. Still, unmoving. Facial reconstruction experts suggested it might have been Andrew. That broke something in Walter Varnum. For 6 years, he had walked beaches, checked morgues, stared into the faces of John Doe. He had accepted the possibility of death. But this idea that his son might have survived, only to die during their escape, or worse, by Lila's own hand, was something he couldn't process. He stopped returning Keen's calls. He stopped opening his door. But Keen didn't stop, because more was coming. Another package arrived, this time at the station. It was small, no return address, postmarked from Pennsylvania. Inside, a VHS tape. No label, no note. The agents hesitated. They'd seen too much. But Keen inserted it anyway. Static, then darkness, then a voice. Faint, female, familiar. Are you listening now? Silence. Then a camera flickered to life. A room, empty, concrete. One bulb swinging above. Footsteps echoed. Then she appeared. Lila Varnum, older than the last tape. Eyes sunken but calm, almost regal in her poise. She stared directly into the lens. You were never looking in the right place, asterisk, she said. Behind her, on the far wall, were words scrawled in chalk. Control isn't taken. It's given. She walked slowly toward the camera. He taught me fear, but I learned power. And now I'm going to teach you both. Click. End of tape. No coordinates. No cruz. Just a message. It shattered every prior theory. The working assumption had always been that Lila died sometime after the escape or went into hiding. But this wasn't hiding. It was hunting. Lila was alive and watching. Agents traced the package's origin to a post office kiosk in rural Pennsylvania. Surveillance footage showed a figure in a hoodie mailing it. No face, gloves, but something strange stood out. She didn't park. She walked there, from the woods. They dispatched teams to canvass the area. Dense forest, dozens of abandoned cabins, animal trails, hunting shacks. On the third day, they found it. A trapdoor, half covered in moss, behind a collapsed stone wall. Beneath it, stairs. A single electric wire running down the shaft. Keen was there when they opened it. Inside, a small room. Bed, food, bottled water, taped windows. On the far wall, a board of newspaper clippings and photographs. All of Winmere. All of them. The parents. Keen. The FBI agents. Their homes. Their families. Drawn arrows. Notes. Times. Patterns. They were the prey now. Asterisk. Lila had been planning something. Watching them for years. Manipulating the narrative. Playing victim, then ghost, then predator. One folder in the corner changed everything. Inside were documents. Pages of handwritten notes, journals, some dated as far back as 1992. But they weren't Lila's. They were Andrew's. The entries began normal. Observations. Desperation. Days marked in scratches. Then, deterioration. She doesn't sleep anymore. Asterisk. She whispers to them in the dark. Asterisk. She says he taught her how to see. Asterisk. I think she's becoming him. Asterisk. The final entry, dated June 8th, 1995, read, I tried to run. She stopped me. She told me I'm not ready for freedom. She told me I still belong to the garden. There were bloodstains on the corner of the page. Keen's hand trembled as he turned it over. If anyone finds this, she's still out there. She's not who you think. Please, stop her. Silence settled over the room. Andrew had been alive. Asterisk, years, asterisk, longer than anyone believed. And Lila had kept him. Like a secret, like a possession. The FBI considered issuing a national bolo. But there was nothing to go on. No last known sighting. No vehicle. No confirmed identity. Until 4 days later, another photo arrived. This time, taped to the front door of Keen's home. It was a picture of him, sleeping in his armchair, his dog curled beside him, his badge on the nightstand. Someone had been inside his house. And on the back, in black ink, "Now you know what it feels like." That was the breaking point. The task force went dark. Files sealed. Agents reassigned. Official word was that the case had gone cold again. Privately, they called it something else. Uncontainable. Asterisk, asterisk. Because it wasn't just a mystery anymore. It was a movement. Across the country, missing persons cases began surfacing that matched the Windermere profile. Couples. No trace. Similar conditions. But in each scene, a symbol was left behind, scratched into wood, carved into glass, burned into trees. An eye, with no pupil, asterisk, asterisk. They called it the Watcher's Mark. It spread like wildfire. Coasts, Midwest, even Canada. Copycats? Cult? Or was Lila building something? He no longer asked himself if she was alive. He asked how many she had. Because wherever she wasn't working alone anymore. She had become the storm, the ghost in the camera, the nightmare that learned how to wake up. And the last thing Andrew ever wrote now echoed louder than ever before. She's not who you think. The night air was changing in Windermere. Not colder, asterisk, asterisk, heavier, asterisk, asterisk. Thick with a tension no one could name, only feel. It hung between conversations like an invisible fog. The locals walked faster, spoke quieter. Curtains closed earlier. Porch lights stayed off. No one said her name anymore. Not in public, not in whispers. They didn't need to. Everyone knew she was back. Asterisk, asterisk. Sheriff Keene hadn't been home in 3 days. His living room still bore the evidence of the intrusion. A shattered lamp, overturned photos, the faint scuff marks of boots near the armchair where he'd been photographed sleeping. He couldn't sleep there anymore. He couldn't sleep at all. The photo had broken the last illusion of distance between them, between him and her. Lila wasn't operating from shadows far away. She was here, moving through their homes, their quiet, trembling town, with the ease of someone who'd already studied them for years. The FBI wanted him to step back. They'd brought in a profiler, a young, fast-talking analyst named Hayden Kellis, who believed Lila had transcended the typical profile of a victim-turned-offender. "She's become something else entirely," he said during the briefing. Asterisk, you're not chasing a serial abductor. You're chasing a belief system now, a self-reinforcing delusion with ritualized behavior. She's not hunting victims. She's building legacy. Asterisk, he didn't like the sound of that. It felt too neat, too clinical. This wasn't a delusion. This was revenge, layered and strategic. A response to something deep and buried. Something that had been cultivated in pain and nurtured in isolation. What disturbed him most wasn't how Lila had turned. It was how quietly it had happened. How seamlessly she had moved from victim to captor to orchestrator. And if what Kellis was saying was true, she wasn't alone anymore. They had no names, no faces, no proof of how many there were or where they were operating from, but patterns were emerging. Couples disappearing in similar fashion across isolated homes and rentals in Washington, Colorado, Georgia, even Nova Scotia. The same symbol left behind. Asterisk, asterisk, the eyeless, I asterisk, asterisk. Burned into doors, scratched onto bathroom mirrors, etched in frost on windows. And every time, the houses were found undisturbed. Like Windermere in 1991. No straged, no break-ins, no witnesses. Just gone. One case struck Keene like a hammer. A young couple, Jules and Carter Levin, had vanished from a cabin in Black Hollow, Maine, just 6 weeks ago. They'd been married a year. According to neighbors, they were inseparable, deeply in love, and had no enemies. They'd driven up for an anniversary getaway. For days later, the cabin was empty. Their belongings were still there. Groceries in the fridge. Her toothbrush on the sink. His shaving kit unopened. But what chilled Keene was the note left behind. A single piece of paper on the dining table. It read, "We are not prisoners. We are chosen." That same night, a flash drive arrived at the Windermere station, postmarked from Maine. Inside footage, unnervingly high quality. A static shot of an underground room. Metal chairs. Concrete floor. Then movement. Jules and Carter were walked in, blindfolded, but they weren't resisting. They walked willingly, hands loosely bound, breathing calm. They sat in the chairs without struggle. Off camera, a voice, female, spoke softly. "You're safe now. You've left the other world behind." A hand reached in from the side. It bore a tattoo on the wrist, an eyeless eye. Keen paused the footage, replayed the voice. He was sure of it. It was Lila. He pushed his chair back, palms sweating. The message was no longer a threat. It was an invitation, and people were accepting it. 2 days later, another clue emerged, but this one from the past. Gloria Mallard, Lila's mother, had been living in a private care facility just outside Charleston. She hadn't spoken much in years, drifting between lucidity and silence. But when a nurse asked her about the night garden, Gloria responded. She said, "It didn't start with them. It started before. With her." The nurse didn't understand, but the name was passed to the FBI, who reached out to Keene. He flew to Charleston that night. Gloria sat on the edge of her bed, staring out the window. Her hands were thin and trembling, folded over a faded scarf. She barely blinked when Keene entered. But when he asked her, softly, what started before, she looked directly at him for the first time in years. Lila had a sister. The air left the room. Keene leaned forward. "What are you saying?" Gloria's voice was brittle, but clear. Her name was Iris. She died when she was 9. We told everyone it was a car accident, but it wasn't. She changed. Lila saw it. The way she went missing at night. The drawings. The voices. Keene's heart pounded. "Why didn't you ever say anything?" Gloria didn't answer for a long time. Then, "Because I think Iris never really died. I think she's still in her. And I think she's the one smiling now." That night, Keene requested Lila's childhood records, school files, medical notes, therapy logs. There had been appointments, episodes of sleepwalking, night terrors. One psychiatrist noted possible shared psychosis between the sisters, indicating that whatever delusions Iris had suffered might have been absorbed by Lila after her death. Could it be? Could Lila's transformation have roots far older than captivity? Could the Watcher have been born not in the chamber beneath the night garden, but in the bedroom of 2 little girls decades ago? And was Lila truly the mind behind it all, or merely the final vessel of something far more ancient? Keene didn't know, but the questions kept him up at night. The walls were closing in, and every time he felt like he had touched the edge of the truth, it receded like fog at dawn. Then, the nightmare came home. August 2nd, 1998. Almost exactly 7 years to the day of Andrew and Lila's disappearance. A couple vanished in Windermere. Not tourists, not strangers. 2 deputies, engaged, in love, local. Deputy Lisa Morrow and Officer Jack Callan had been camping for the weekend at Black Rock Ridge, a remote hiking trail just outside town. They'd left Friday, due back Sunday. When they didn't report in, a team was dispatched. Their tent was found undisturbed. Campfire cold, coffee mugs half full, but nearby, carved into the bark of a tree, the eyeless eye, and beneath it, a message. The circle returns to where it began. Keene's heart nearly failed. He recognized the phrase. It was written in one of Andrew's journals. He raced back to the evidence room, dug through the folder. There it was, scrawled on a page dated 1994. She says the circle returns to where it began. That I'll understand one day. That she's not killing me. She's transforming me. Asterisk. He sat back in his chair, dizzy. Windermere was not just where it began. It was where it would end. The next night, the lights at house number 47 flickered back on. No one had lived there in years. The place had been boarded, condemned. But at 2:03 a.m., the porch light came on. A faint static buzz hummed from inside. The neighbors called it in. When Keene and the agents arrived, they found the front door open. Inside, candles burned. Dozens of them. In the living room, where the sketchbook had once been left open, sat a new drawing. A woman, surrounded by flames. Eyes hollow. And below it, written in blood. This is the rebirth. You watch the death. From upstairs, a soft humming. Keene drew his weapon, climbed the stairs. The door to the master bedroom was ajar. Inside, a television played static. On the bed, two mannequins dressed like Andrew and Lila, covered in red fabric, posed as if asleep. Between them, a videotape. Keen turned it over. It was labeled, "The Beginning of the End." The woman in the photograph had no name. At least, not one anyone could verify. Detective Carla Mason sat at her desk, staring at the image that had come through late the previous evening via a secure, encrypted email. The attached message was short, typed in all lowercase, and devoid of punctuation. "She's not who you think she is. Search Ellington Archive, 1990 to 1991. Ask Elliot Tanner before it's too late. ****. She had read it 10 times, printed it, highlighted it, stared at it, as if the paper would somehow whisper secrets. Then she compared the face in the photo, blurred slightly, like a frame from an old VHS tape, to every archived image she had from the Donnelly case. It wasn't Amy. Not quite, but it was close. Too close. Carla leaned back, letting the chair creak under her weight. The flickering desk lamp above her buzzed slightly. The precinct was mostly quiet at this hour, and outside, a dense fog pressed against the windows like wet cotton, muting the world. She turned toward her evidence board. Threads stretched across it like veins. Dates, names, locations, theories. Everything had once pointed to the ocean. A couple vanished from their beach house in 1991, never seen again. But now, the lines didn't connect so easily. Someone had been actively obscuring the truth. She picked up her phone and dialed the number Elliot Tanner had given her during their strange meeting in the courthouse archives. The line rang 5 times before a groggy voice answered. "I said I'd call when I was ready," Elliot grumbled. "You were right," Carla said. "She's not who she claims to be, but I need more." There was silence on the other end. Then a deep sigh. "Meet me at the old Canfield storage off, Route 12. Unit 68. I'll bring what I have." The call ended. Carla was already grabbing her coat. The storage facility was as desolate as expected, the rusted units lined up like decaying tombs under flickering floodlights. The air smelled like mildew and something faintly chemical. Carla found Unit 68 toward the back, its corrugated steel door already half open. Elliot stood inside, a stack of cardboard boxes beside him. He looked thinner, hollowed out by years of secrets. "She came to me," he said before she could ask. "Back in '93. Said she was researching coastal disappearances. Used the name Claire Fenwick. But the way she asked questions, the way she knew details, she wasn't a reporter. She knew the names of local patrol officers, radio call signs, the shift rotation schedule for the Harbor Authority. Stuff no civilian would know. You think she was involved?" "I think," he said, lifting a folder from the top of the box, "that the Donnellys stumbled onto something they weren't supposed to see." Carla opened the folder. Inside were satellite photos, grainy, time-stamped and cryptic, aerial shots of the Ellington Beach area dated just days before the couple vanished. But something stood out, a temporary barge floating off the coast with no registered ID. And nearby, small boats ferrying crates to the shore, all under the cover of night. "This isn't smuggling," Carla said. "It's military. Private," Elliot corrected. "Contracted through a dummy shell registered in the Caymans." Everything was scrubbed after the Donnellys went missing. She flipped through more documents, decommissioned black site blueprints, supply logs, and an old map of underground tunnels beneath the town. Her stomach turned. "They weren't taken by strangers, were they?" she asked. "This was a sanctioned abduction." Elliot nodded grimly. "They saw too much. Or maybe they were involved, then backed out. I never could figure that part out." Back in her car, Carla couldn't shake the images. Underground tunnels, secret barges, vanished people. It sounded like conspiracy fiction, but every new thread tugged tighter around something real, something deliberately buried for decades. She drove straight to the property records office. If the Donnellys had seen something from the beach house, then perhaps the key was in its location. The clerk was reluctant at first, but Carla showed her badge and pressed harder. Eventually, she was handed a stack of dusty ledgers from 1989 to 1992. The original builder of the beach house had only owned it for 7 months before selling it. despite it being newly constructed. The buyer? A company called West Edge Ventures, which was later dissolved. Tracing the paper trail led her to a holding company, and then another. Finally, she reached a dead end until she noticed the names on the notary page of the last document. Amy Donnelly, ***, but not as a buyer, as the witness. How? How could Amy have signed this 2 years before they even moved in? Carla whispered. A chill ran up her spine. Was a woman in the photograph not Amy's impersonator, but Amy herself? Had she returned? Meanwhile, in the quiet town of Ellington, strange things began to happen. A dog walker discovered an old duffel bag in the woods behind the community center. Inside were notebooks soaked from rain, pages stuck together, but legible in parts. Most were filled with diagrams, strange symbols, and descriptions of underground chambers. One page caught the attention of investigators. If you find this, I'm probably dead. My name is Mark Donnelly. This is not a runaway case. We were taken, and someone inside the town helped cover it up. The writing was frantic, the ink smudged, but the signature matched known samples from his employment records. When Carla was shown the evidence, her hands trembled. I want that bag, she said. Now. She stayed up all night reading what she could. In one entry, Mark described hearing voices through the walls, mention of tests, and a place called the Hollow. Another read. Amy was injected with something. She forgets things. Her eyes go glassy. I think they're trying to turn her into someone else. Carla stared at that line for a long time. The Hollow. It wasn't a town, or a facility, or even a place you could find on a map. But Carla had heard it before. During her earliest days on the force, an older detective had spoken about a Cold War-era facility buried beneath the cliffs of southern Ellington, a place used for non-traditional interrogation methods. It was officially sealed off in the early 80s. But what if it wasn't? With Elliot's help and a copy of the old utility maps, Carla followed a dried-up creek bed through the woods until it ended in a thicket of brambles and rotted fence posts. There, half concealed beneath moss and debris, was a rusted hatch. It took nearly 30 minutes to pry it open. The metal groaned as if waking from a long sleep. A stale gust of air blew out, damp, metallic, and earthy. She shined her flashlight down the stairs. The concrete steps descended into darkness. She climbed in. The corridor was narrow, damp, and lined with peeling paint. Faint outlines of long-forgotten warnings covered the walls in faded stencils. Restricted. Biohazard. Authorized personnel only. ***. Carla moved slowly, her light catching rusted lockers, shattered glass, and overturned chairs. It was like time had stopped mid-evacuation. In one room, she found a cot, restraints, and a flickering CCTV screen still hooked to power via backup generator. A single bulb glowed weakly in the hallway, casting shadows like skeletal fingers. Then she found the tapes. Stacked in an old cabinet were dozens of unmarked VHS cassettes. She stuffed several in her bag, heart pounding. As she turned to leave, she heard it. A voice, very faint, almost a whisper. It echoed down the corridor like a breath through metal. Mark, she froze. The flashlight flickered once, twice, and then, behind her, a shadow moved. For 3 long days, silence fell over the town like a heavy fog. No new statements were made. No leads shared. The press backed away, slightly, sensing something bigger was brewing. Those closest to the case, the parents, the surviving siblings, the neighbors, even former investigators, felt it in their bones. Something was about to happen. And it did. On the morning of September 15th, 2018, at exactly 7:36 a.m., the sealed crawl space beneath the foundation of the old Walker Beach house was unsealed, not by law enforcement, but by an independent contractor hired for renovation. He had no idea what the house was until the townspeople pointed it out. The media had since called it the house that watched them disappear. The contractor's name was Russ Harrow, a seasoned builder, ex-military, not easily rattled. But the moment he cracked open that rusted hatch under the house, the scent hit him, damp, bitter, mold-soaked decay mixed with something else, something that didn't belong. He turned his flashlight downward, called out once into the black gap below, and descended with cautious steps. 5 minutes later, he crawled out, trembling. He called 911 with shaking hands. His voice on the dispatch recording would later circulate. There's something buried down there. It's not animal. It's not right. When investigators arrived, they found a hollowed space roughly the size of a walk-in closet carved beneath the concrete beams. What was inside would shift the entire narrative of the past 27 years. No human remains. No sign of Peter or Lauren. But there was a thick, padded trunk, old and deteriorating, stashed against the far end of the hollow. The outside had scratches, deep, almost desperate grooves in the worn wood. Inside it, they found 2 sets of children's clothing, neatly folded, aged but unmistakably familiar. The same clothes Lauren and Peter were last seen in. And under those clothes, sealed in a plastic bag, was a cassette tape. The label, smudged and barely legible, read, "Listen alone." The media exploded. Forensics confirmed the items were authentic. The clothes had traced DNA from both children. But it was the tape, what was on the tape, that would alter everything the world thought they knew. Authorities refused to release its contents publicly. But a leak happened. Of course it did. The recording began with silence. 47 seconds of it. Then the faintest sound of breathing. Labored. Frightened. Then Peter's voice, unmistakably younger. "Lauren, it's dark. I think it's night now." Another voice responded, trembling and hoarse. "I'm hungry. I want to go home." There was a pause. A creaking sound, maybe with shifting, and then Peter again, whispering. I heard the man again. He's walking upstairs. Then a faint dragging noise. And silence. The tape cut off at that moment, and it resumed with a second section. This time, a different voice, a woman. Clear, cold, composed. "To whoever finds this, you'll never believe what happened in this house. No one did. I tried to warn them. I tried." The voice broke slightly. "They call me mad, but it was never me. It was the house. It was the man. He used the crawl space. That's how he got in. That's how he took them." Click. That was the end. The tape ignited public hysteria. Online theorists claimed it was a hoax. Skeptics said the voice of the children could be fabricated. But the FBI's audio specialists authenticated the tape. It was analog, made in the early 90s. The children's voices matched samples from old home videos. There was no doubt. The tape was real. The police quickly turned attention to the woman's voice. Who was she? A week later, a local historian identified it. The woman on the tape was Margaret Easton, a tenant who'd lived in the Walker Beach house in 1974, long before the Winters family ever set foot in it. Margaret had disappeared in 1980 under suspicious circumstances. Her case had gone cold decades earlier. Her file was reopened. She'd claimed, in journals and one recorded police interview, that she heard footsteps above her at night, despite living alone. That items vanished. That voices whispered from beneath the floorboards. Her claims were dismissed as psychosis, possibly drug-induced. Now, those same claims aligned precisely with Peter's whispered words on the cassette. The crawl space itself became a focal point. Forensic teams spent 3 weeks combing every inch of it. They found hair, blood, old fingerprints, and most disturbingly, a long strip of cloth that matched the lining of Lauren's favorite teddy bear. But what shocked everyone was what they didn't find. No passy, no trapdoor, no tunnel. There was no physical way in or out of that crawl space from outside the house. No hidden door behind the walls. No broken flooring above. It was a sealed chamber with one entrance. The hatch Russ had opened. This ignited a terrifying possibility, one the authorities refused to comment on publicly, but had begun whispering among themselves. Whoever took Peter and Lauren might never have left. The house was evacuated again. The renovation was canceled. The Walker Beach house was placed under 24/7 surveillance, not for preservation, but because local authorities were afraid to enter again. Then came the night of October 3rd. A security guard posted outside the house reported lights flickering inside, even though the house had no working electricity. He swore he saw shadows move past the windows. Twice. But when backup arrived, nothing was found inside. Only one thing had changed. The tape cassette was gone from the evidence locker. Surveillance footage showed nothing. 2 days later, the Winters family received a package at their old address, forwarded by the new owners. Inside was the tape, but now it contained a third segment. This time, the audio was distorted, static cut in and out. Voices were layered, disjointed. Then a single, clear phrase came through. They were never yours to lose. No one claimed responsibility for sending it. No fingerprints. No tracking. The case grew darker with every clue. Stranger, and more chillingly personal, because the voice that spoke that final sentence matched no one in the FBI's database. But when Peter and Lauren's mother, Meredith, heard it, she collapsed. Because she swore it was the voice of her grandmother, long deceased. Authorities tried to rationalize. Maybe it was coincidence, an audio trick, emotional projection. But Meredith knew, because the last thing her grandmother ever told her, just days before her passing, was this: keep your children away from that beach house. That place remembers. No one had taken her seriously. Now they all did. The house was sealed permanently after that. Or so they said. But 6 months later, a tourist family visiting the beach reported something strange. Their 6-year-old son wandered too close to the abandoned property. When they found him, he was sitting by the back porch, staring at the rotted wood with wide, tear-filled eyes. When asked what he was doing, he whispered, "I was listening to the floor. The boy and girl inside told me to leave. They said it's almost full now." The family left town the same day, and they never returned. They say that some truths are better left buried. But the truth about what happened to Claire and Jeremy Holloway had waited in the shadows long enough. And now, as the 30-year anniversary approached, one final twist clawed its way to the surface. Unexpected, brutal in its simplicity, and devastating in its implications. October 8th, 2021. Almost 30 years to the day since Claire and Jeremy vanished from their quiet North Carolina beach house. The storm that had once begun this story with winds and whispers had now returned. Not a hurricane this time, but a relentless nor'easter, battering the coastline and cutting power across the barrier island. Trees bent at the neck, windows rattled in their frames, and the old beach house, abandoned and marked with caution tape since the last phase of forensic work, stood like a corpse that refused to decay. That night, Michael and Lillian Holloway sat in their now-aging living room in Raleigh. They were barely speaking anymore. Years of grief, false hope, public scrutiny, and buried guilt had hollowed out their marriage. They existed like shadows beside each other, haunted, numb. Then, at 11:42 p.m., Lillian's phone buzzed. It was a call from block number. Her hand trembled as she picked it up. A voice, raspy, low, unfamiliar yet oddly familiar. "You're not going to like what they find tomorrow, but you should hear it from me first." Click. The line went dead. Lillian stared at the phone. Her heart began to pound in a rhythm she hadn't felt in years. Michael noticed her pale face and leaned forward. "What is it?" I don't know," she whispered, tears already rising to the surface. "But something's coming." And it did. The next morning, in the aftermath of the storm, a local maintenance crew was clearing out debris along the wooden walkway leading to the now cordoned-off Holloway Beach house. A section of the ground had collapsed near the sand dunes, revealing what looked like a hatch. A rusted steel door, flush with the earth, covered in layers of sand and time. The team stopped, called it in. Within hours, state police, FBI agents, and forensic investigators swarmed the area. And what they found beneath that hatch would crack the case wide open, but not in the way anyone expected. The hatch led to a narrow, damp staircase, and beneath it, a sealed underground room. A bunker. There were shelves with preserved food, a mattress, a small table, rusted tools, old magazines, a cracked mirror, and on the far wall, a wall painted with a child's handprints, hung a photograph, sealed in a bag. It showed Claire and Jeremy, alive, but changed. Their hair was longer, their expressions gaunt, and behind them stood someone else. A man, face partially obscured, but the shape of his jaw and the tilt of his head set off alarms in Michael's mind when the photo was shown to them. He knew that profile. So did Lillian. It was Thomas. Thomas Green, Michael's childhood friend. Their best man, a neighbor from 2 doors down at the beach. The man who had mysteriously moved away just 2 months after the disappearance. Claimed it was for work. Never stayed in contact. Lillian dropped the photograph and turned away. Oh God. A full investigation into Thomas Green was reopened. They traced property deeds, searched his financial records, re-interviewed neighbors from decades past. And then came the final blow. A hidden room discovered on a remote piece of land in Western Virginia, registered under an alias. Inside, investigators found what appeared to be a safe house, maps of the Carolina coast, pages of surveillance notes, and videotapes. Over a dozen of them, each dated, each labeled with initials, CH and JH. On them, footage of Claire and Jeremy inside the underground bunker. As teenagers, as adults, alone, frightened, speaking softly, pleading into the camera, trying to reason with someone off-screen. The tapes ended around 2012. In one of the final videos, Claire stared directly into the lens. If anyone finds this, please tell our parents we didn't run away. We didn't leave them. We were taken, and we never stopped hoping. Her voice cracked. We still hope. What followed was a national frenzy. The media unearthed old footage, speculation exploded, and investigators launched an international manhunt for Thomas Green, who, by then, had completely vanished. Interpol was involved. His face went on every screen, every news outlet. He was declared one of the most wanted men in the country. But no trace of him surfaced. He had disappeared as completely as the Holloway children once had. Meanwhile, the biggest question of all remained unanswered. Where were Claire and Jeremy now? A nationwide effort was mobilized. Tips poured in. There were dozens of false leads. People claiming to have seen them in rural gas stations, on buses, at shelters. But none of them led to a verified sighting. And then, 6 months later, in a private mailbox in a small town in Tennessee, a letter arrived for Lillian and Michael Holloway. No return address. Inside, a photo. New. Dated. It showed a man and woman, both in their early 40s, standing side by side in front of a cabin. It was unmistakably Claire and Jeremy. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, "We're safe, but we can't come back. He's still out there, and we don't want you in danger. We love you. Always did. Always will." And beneath that, in bold black ink, "Do not try to find us." The case was officially closed in 2023. Claire and Jeremy Holloway were declared found, but in self-imposed hiding, protected by anonymity, and likely living under new identities. The state quietly closed the investigation without further detail, citing personal safety concerns. Michael and Lillian, now both in their 70s, never spoke to the media again. They moved away from Raleigh, changed their numbers. And every year on October 9th, they would leave a red flower on the steps of the old beach house, now restored but unoccupied, hoping that maybe, just maybe, one day, they'd see their children again. No one knows what happened to Thomas Green. Some believe he fled the country. Others think he died alone in a bunker of his own making. But those close to the case know this. He was never a random predator. He was someone they trusted. Someone who'd watched the Holloway children grow up. Who'd learned their patterns, their vulnerabilities. Who knew where to hide them and how to keep them quiet. The betrayal was deeper than any crime, and the scar it left would last generations. Some stories don't end with justice. They end with silence, with survivors living in the cracks of a broken world, far from the lives they should have had. Claire and Jeremy Holloway were found, but nothing would ever truly bring them back. Not to the beach, not to that house, not to the time before the wind changed everything.